member for Denry North.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I rise for the 8th time in as many years to make a contribution in the Parliament of this country on the debate on the estimates of revenue and expenditure, or what the average St. Lucian prefers to call the national budget. And as I rise, Mr. Speaker, I am reminded of the struggles of the people whose interests, concerns, and aspirations I represent in the Parliament, the people of Denry North. A constituency partitioned into the communities of Olio, Despin, Lapel, Larissos, Grand Ravine, Belmont, Richford, Tamazo, Dibonnet, Grand Rivière, Gadet, and Denier Rivière, each with its own unique characteristics, but all united in their pursuit of excellence through hard work and determination. They were the ones, Mr. Speaker, the constituents or residents of those communities, who went to the polls in the last 2 general elections to repose their collective confidence in my ability to lead the charge on their behalf in the scheme of national development. And for that, I remain eternally grateful. Mr. Speaker, je voulais prendre l'occasion pour remercier tout le Denry North qui j'ai voté pour moi en 2 élections. Pour moi autorisation pour venir à Caïcosit et pour parler bayo et pour mener devant le gouvernement, c'est là qui a affecté yo et puis la vie yo et puis la vie maman yo. Mr. Speaker, I went through 668 pages of the estimates, and I saw a national budget of $1.5 billion. And when I saw that astronomical figure, let me wear $1.5 billion comme budget pays cette ici pour l'année ça, a lot of things crossed my mind. Is that finally a time, Mr. Speaker, unlike the year before, when the people of Denry North will get their fair share of the national pie? I also ask myself, Mr. Speaker, given the quantum over which we debated last year, are we going to see a more prudent management of the finances of this country? Mr. Speaker, I listened as the Prime Minister presented the estimates, and from his pronouncements, one would have gotten the impression that everything is fine in this country. And based on his pronouncements, one would have gotten the impression that in the history of this country, notwithstanding we had a few prime ministers before him, none had exercised more fiscal prudence than he has done in his 2 or 3 years at the helm. The figures he quoted, or what he chose to highlight, were very favorable according to him. And that as a result, St. Lucians ought to be happy. People ought not to be griping. People ought not to have any problems because the Prime Minister has come to the Parliament and presented a very glowing image of the economy of the country. And he was followed by some of his colleagues, Mr. Speaker, who echoed the sentiments that things are nice, the economy is doing well. The figures reflect a cadre of men and women who manage the country better than anybody else can. And so I had to ask myself, if the figures are so favorable, if your surplus figures are so nice and so good, why, Mr. Speaker, did I not see the reinstatement of the distress fund? Why, Mr. Speaker? Why, Mr. Speaker, I cannot see provisions here for a more functionable healthcare system? Why is it that the nurses have to call you on the side as an opposition MP to complain about the conditions under which they work? Why is it that the nurse whom I give a ride from an inner community in my constituency to the main road to catch a bus has to open her bag to show me the soap that she has to take to the hospital so that she can wash her hands after she's attended to a patient? And if these things, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister has said, that are supposed to portray St. Lucia and the economy in such a favorable light, why is it that we cannot address those basic issues? Basic issues. But this is a Prime Minister and a government that is preoccupied with the vision of grandeur. And as we speak, and there's nothing that peeves me more as somebody who's supposed to represent the interest of the marginalized and the people of Denrinoff than to drive to Viewfort as we speak and to see a horse racing track under construction at a time when we cannot attend to basic facilities and infrastructure in the different communities. That can never be right. And Mr. Speaker, nobody in it, none of the 17, can eyeball me or anybody of substance and tell me objectively that they agree with that kind of initiative. That is wrong. And we have to denounce that, every single one of us. And I understand that there are times you're going to be part of a team where when you are part of a team, Mr. Speaker, some of the decisions will be taken that you do not want to speak out against publicly. But we have to frown on those things. The actual revenue in a number of areas surpassed the projected amounts. That is what we were told. And as that happens, Mr. Speaker, in the constituency of Denrinoff, 2 years, 3 years, we have a health center that has been dysfunctional and out of commission. I cannot, Mr. Speaker, come in this parliament and let the eyes have it and sit passively in my chair and not raise those concerns. That is wrong. And I know that some of you on this side know that it is wrong. But for convenience, you will sit there and the eyes will have it. But I will tell you this, there's a life after politics. And some of you, in your older years, you will have to reflect on some of the decisions that you are part of. That can never be right, Mr. Speaker. And as he spoke, the Prime Minister spoke, Mr. Speaker, and he attempted to convince the House. After some of the pronouncements, he would turn to his colleagues to eyeball them in search of confidence and inspiration to continue saying more. Mr. Speaker, the roads are in a deplorable condition. Public servants are agitated. Farmers are demoralized. And then we speak about an economy that is doing so well. We have massive savings. We were happy to boast about the sinking fund or the reserves being at $21 million, Mr. Speaker. Yes, but if the savings are so good and the conditions are so favorable, I'm asking that this be reflected in the lives of the everyday people whom I represent in this chamber. It cannot be for the figures to be good on the books and that is not reflected in the daily struggles of the people whom I represent in this parliament. That cannot be right, Mr. Speaker. And as long as I have the life, the energy, and the will to come through the walls of this chamber, I will continue to speak out against those things. A government for family, friends, and undeserving foreigners. You heard the pronouncements yesterday from my colleague from Castries South. You also heard from the member for Castries East. And all how you try to be objective, Mr. Speaker. And sometimes you are inclined, because it is in your nature, to give the government the benefit of the doubt. Give them the benefit of the doubt. It boils down to the same thing, Mr. Speaker. Foreigners, friends, and family. It cannot be right for foreigners, friends, and family when the farmers of Denrinoff, as I said, continue to be demoralized. Mr. Speaker, I will move to the estimates and move quickly to head 41 on page 567. Denri Water Supply Redevelopment. $14,192,111. Mr. Speaker, from my understanding of it, that amount had already gotten parliamentary approval at a previous sitting. So it's just reflected in the national budget. I want to place on record that the amount that the CDB is making or has made available for phase 2 of the Denrinoff Water Redevelopment Project, that amount had already been secured by the St. Lucia Labour Party government. And we got a commitment from the Caribbean Development Bank in May of 2016. That was before the general elections, that the CDB, yes, they got in touch with us to tell us that the monies for phase 2 had been approved at the CDB board meeting. And I have said before that in a letter to his line permanent secretary, the general manager of WASCO wrote to John Calix to, as part of his responsibilities to apprise him of the project, told him, yes, the CDB had approved the loan in May of 2016. In May of 2016, it was the St. Lucia Labour Party that was in government. And in much the same way, it was the St. Lucia Labour Party government that secured the $5 million US for phase 1 of that project. So there's nothing new, nothing novel, nothing that is earth-shattering that this new administration has done with respect to that particular project. But I will hasten to add, Mr. Speaker, that I am very grateful, as I've said before, that the project was not stopped. The project was not stopped. Because the water problem in that constituency is one that has been in existence for a very, very long time, spanning decades. Gouvernement ni un budget là l'année ça là $14 millions pour ranger les affaires d'eau en Denrinoff. Et je dis, Mr. Speaker, même si nous avons l'argent ça là en l'année 2019, 2019, ça c'est l'argent gouvernement Léba déjà mandé CDB avant l'élection en 2016, 2016. Et CDB dit nous, oui, vous avez fait l'argent ça available. You also dit, à mon pour dire ici à bon matin, la première phase projet qu'on nous a fait water treatment plant à Tamazo, nous fait et puis l'argent Mexico, gouvernement Mexico, by gouvernement Saint-Lucie, qu'on en cadeau. Mais ça n'a pas été assez pour faire le projet, pour bailler toute vallée à Glo, et c'est pour raison ça, gouvernement Léba, c'est allé CDB pour demander pour l'on. Les gouvernements venus, ils ont debout ça pour un petit moment, et le ministre agricole, qui a une responsabilité pour Glo, il dit dans la cérémonie en Vallée, that you teni pour review et c'est pour ça you te debout projet. Mais le gouvernement ça c'est pas le gouvernement qui te mis des pièces loan application before the Caribbean Development Bank. So Mr. Speaker, phase 1 having been completed, the people of Grand Riviere are enjoying a clean water supply. And as recent as last month, the water was tested and it was revealed that the quality surpasses that of any other treatment plant in the entire country. So the people of Grand Riviere, the people of Richford, the people of Grand Ravine are getting water from the Tamazo treatment plant as part of phase 1. Phase 2 has started, and the people of Denny Riviere, in particular Austin Hill and Babawa, Belmont, they too will be benefiting from phase 2, as will the people of Gadet, Larissus, Lapel, Olion, and Despin. Et moi, je sais pour combien d'années, Mr. Speaker, moun teni pour lever 12 jours. Et si l'année 4 moun en kaila, 3 ni pour y dormir, et yon ni pour rester la nuit pour t'en l'aigle à venir. Because when the taps at most of the homes are closed, the pressure builds up in the line, and some of the areas that are deprived during the day, they get a trickle in the night, and people have to stay up in the wee hours. They had to stay up to be able, Mr. Speaker, to get a couple containers filled at their homes. This will be no more when phase 2 is completed. And I want to thank the people of Denrinoff for the patience that they've been able to exercise over the years before that intervention was made. Mr. Speaker, but as we speak, the problem is still very acute in some communities. I got a call only yesterday morning from a young lady who had called the day before, lamenting the situation in their little pocket of Olio. And she was telling me how they had gone for about 2 or 3 weeks without water. I immediately put a call through to the management of WASCO, and one of the technical people were able to answer and say to me that the pressure was just low, and that is why that particular section of Olean called Larry there, they would not get in water. People like Madna, Monique, Brizo, and them are having a serious problem getting water. But I will tell you one thing, Mr. Speaker. I must commend the management of WASCO. There's been an attempt on the part of the management of WASCO to engage the Office of the Parliamentary Rep and community-based organization in terms of information sharing where that particular project is concerned. But I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, that at least something is being done. Too many incidents or cases of kidney disease in Dennery North. The rate of cancer in Dennery North is one of the highest in the country. I see too many of my constituents on the line waiting to be dialyzed, waiting for dialysis. And the health professionals are beginning to tell us that it is very possible that the high incidence of cancer and renal failure might well be attributed to the quality of water or the poor quality of the water that they've been consuming over the years. So maybe, Mr. Speaker, just maybe, our generation has already been contaminated, and this is a project, the benefit of which the younger ones will enjoy. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the water project in Dennery North, as I aligned it to Head 41 on page 567 of the budget, I want to thank once again, on behalf of the people of Dennery North, the government of Mexico through their embassy in St. Lucia. And I know he's no longer here as the ambassador, but special mention must be made of Ambassador Moreno, who worked very diligently to ensure that the resources for Phase 1 were made available to bring clean drinking water to the people of Dennery North. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the personnel of UNOPS, United Nations Office of Project Services. They played a critical role in delivering Phase 1, and for that we are extremely grateful. I want to thank CIE and the Renault Group for their role in that particular project. I want to thank Vinci Construction, based out of France, Mr. Speaker, the lead company in executing the civil works for the Dennery North Water Redevelopment Project. Mr. Speaker, I must thank my people of Dennery North for their patience, as I said, because it has been a long and difficult road for them where water resources is concerned. So, je vais pièce on Vinicia, Mr. Speaker. Ekfex, gardez, à cause du projet GLO Dennery North, c'est un projet gouvernement Liba. Et là, regardez Facebook page Prime Minister, il y a des jours qui passent. Il a mouché, gouvernement Flambeau, sorry, par des personnes queer, Project GLO Dennery North, c'est projet gouvernement Flambeau. Ça, c'est un projet qui a commencé par le gouvernement Liba, et que nous faisons Phase 1, mais provision pour Phase 1 et puis Phase 2. But Mr. Speaker, I saw on the Prime Minister's Facebook page where the Prime Minister was taking credit for the delivery of water in Dennery North. This is a government that has nothing to show after 3 years in government. You have presided over 3 budgets. And after 3 years, you have nothing of substance to show. You have presided over 3 wasted years. And I've come to this parliament, and the sittings have been regular enough for you to come here and lay down your accomplishments and your achievements. You have nothing to show after presiding over 3 budgets and 3 wasted years. You have wasted resources. That is what you've done. And the member of Castries South told you yesterday, if you had 60-odd million in revenue from CIP or thereabouts, one entity brought about 40 million out of that. 54. And then you had to pay them because you mess up project et que presque toute la radio mène vie. Et que vous voulez venir dire nous fait bien l'année savings, qui ça on est pour mouchi? What have you done? Seul bagay gouvernement Flambeau ça dit yo ja fait qui neuf en pays ça depuis yo entré. C'est commencer un track ko yo kay mener cheval Jean yo. Pas cheval yo. Pas cheval Jean vieux fort. Et moi même pour Mikou, ka oui. Moi suis content si n'a pas cheval sort Mikou. T'es kay en l'air. Mais c'est cheval Jean qui sort de notre pays. That is all you have to show. I will be the first to acknowledge your accomplishment and say, yes, you've done this, you've done that. Expert, you have done nothing in 3 years. You have nothing to show. Nothing to show. Mr. Speaker, I move to Head 44, or I stay on Head 44, Agriculture. And I see in the budget a provision of $3.9 million, almost $4 million for the banana productivity improvement project this year. Je dis encore ici, je dis encore, Mr. Speaker, pièce démarche, pièce gouvernement cette ici, qui les bat ou qui fait le beau point pour aider femmes africaines, ça va toujours joindre si pour mon parlement pour Denry North. Because je comprends contribution FIG j'ai fait pour le développement pays cette ici. I understand the contribution that the banana industry would have made to the development of our country. I remember the days of green gold. But Mr. Speaker, as the industry transitioned over time, there was displacement for a lot of farmers. World Trade Organization rules kicked in. We lost preferential treatment. Farmers pas de avant fig blanc bité que de avant avant. Et ça a affecté industry fig tout bonnement. Mr. Speaker, in 1990, en 1990, cette liste a produit passé 100,000 tons fig. Et nous avons joint plus que 187 million dollars in revenue. In 1991, nous avons produit just about 100,000 tons. Et nous avons joint 146 million dollars. Et quand c'était ça, c'est fig qui a mené le pays cette ici. Mais comme on dit, bagay changer les market fig là. Farmers ils ont des difficultés pour vendre because conditions les market là partie même. Et tourism took over as the mainstay of our economy. But Mr. Speaker, pas pis yon des farmers tapé koyo displaced qu'on nous dit en anglais. Dat la tourism là pas ça taper dépenser en ces community fig là. Les figues qui amènent l'argent, toute cette lycée qui a bénéficié de ça. Et moi je dis avec moi dit, et si moi reste 20 années comme quand je reste en caille concite, moi je dis 20 années. L'argent figue qui fait Rodney. L'argent figue qui fait Castries Waterfront. L'argent figue qui fait Roseau Dam, l'argent figue qui a payé docteur, teacher, nurse et puis tout le monde. Et Mr. Speaker, piste figue pas ça été avant. Les gouvernements les bas essayaient and we attempted to get the tourism dollars spent in those banana communities by way of social programs. They stopped the programs, and instead of understanding the plight of the ordinary St. Lucian, the Prime Minister himself chose to refer to them as mendicants. How can that be right, Mr. Speaker? And of course there will be fundamental differences in policy. There are days we will come here, Mr. Speaker, and all of us will agree on some issues. And there are days when we will be poles apart on some other issues. But you know what? Common thread that is supposed to influence our disposition in this House? We ought to be objective. And first and foremost, we must remember at all times that we should be working in the interest of the people of St. Lucia. So that if tourism today is the mainstay of the economy, and a community like Denry North does not benefit directly from the tourism dollar, the social programs that the tourism dollar is supposed to fund cannot be stopped in a community, and then you tell me that if people have certain needs that must be met, as will be the case in any country where you have a stratification of the populace, to choose to refer to those who may not necessarily be able to fend for themselves as mendicants. How can that be right, Mr. Speaker? And I don't know how educated men and women can just sit and what some members on the other side do not understand. Your silence is not enough. It makes you equally culpable to some of the decisions that are taken by a select few, at least 2 or 3 on the other side. Once you sit there, you are going to be part of it, and you will be judged in much the same way that the front runners will be judged. Mr. Speaker, Tropical Storm Kirk came and it decimated the banana crop in St. Lucia. Today, you still have farmers coming to my office every day because they're not able to get insurance compensation for the crop. And these are people who have stayed the course. Notwithstanding all the difficulties that farmers have faced, they have stayed the course. Si l'INAC a still quitté Belmonte Calais les figli tous les jours, il travaille wed pour l'argent. Soslin ka fe men bay la. René, Roman, Auguste, Citonel, Vanos, Jeanne, Laurent, Pauli, Bailey, et puis Lucia, Lincoln Boudou, toutes ces moun sa la ka ki de kayo, et puis yo ka aller en les femmes figure to earn an honest living. Notwithstanding the challenges of the industry, we know their challenges, but they continue to toil. And once they go into toil, and even if the government revenue is not substantial today in comparison to what it used to be, Mr. Speaker, I will always stand behind these farmers to ensure that they get what is rightly theirs. So I'm calling on the Minister for Agriculture, and by extension the government, to please intervene, because you have a custodial responsibility to those farmers and their interests. Uni responsabilité pour ces farmers là, pour qui c'est Win Crop or whichever insurance company that they had entered into an agreement with. The Prime Minister is a farmer, he has an FAR. Well, even him too, Mr. Speaker, we can represent in that discourse. But the government needs to make representation on behalf of those farmers. It can never be right for you to go about your merry way. And I sat in cabinet too, and I know almost every Monday in cabinet, the memos that come for concession, and we are quick to give concessions, especially this government that is in office today, to foreigners. And all the farmers are asking for is a little help. Somebody to show that, look, we have your best interests at heart. So I'm hoping that when the Minister for Agriculture, or at least the Prime Minister in his rebuttal, can take the floor, Mr. Speaker, they can at least provide some soulagement. Et dit ces femmes qui pourraient payer from insurance, that you can joindre l'argent tout de suite au gouvernement qui mette des marches en place pour voir qui compagnie insurance là qui dit en bail. They do not have the luxury of people in big business, but as I said, they leave their homes in the wee hours. They spend long days on those farms, and you know what continues to motivate them, or what keeps them going? Because theirs is an ideal that is predicated on honesty and hard work. And I will never see them as mendicants, as some persons choose to refer to them. So, Mr. Speaker, the $3.9 million allocated in the budget on the Head 41 for the Banana Productivity Improvement Project is something that I support. And I'm just hoping, Mr. Speaker, that it can impact the constituency of Denrinof in particular, and by extension, banana farmers all over the country. Mr. Speaker, permit me to move on to Head 53. I paid very close attention to pages 586 and 587. Head 53, Health and Wellness. Mr. Speaker, I went through the 2 pages in the daytime. I chose to do the same on a particular evening. I also attempted to get clarification from the member for Beaufort North, although I know he had absolutely no input in the preparation of that particular document. What was I looking for? I was looking for the reinstatement of the amount that the United Workers' Party government found in the budget when it came in for the Larissus Health Center. And it is not there. Ça c'est troisième année, gouvernement flabou en power. Là, yo vini en office in 2016. You join a budget là through a grand contribution, ROCT, Republic of China, Taiwan, an amount for the reinstatement of the Larissus Health Center that was destroyed by fire. Yo tiye. Yo tiye. E ka vinisia. E ka di nou gouvernement ka fait bien. We have savings. We have surplus. The reserves are at their best. E kou pa sa mette $200,000 pour ça mettre l'argent vieux pour manger Health Center Larissus. And it pains me, not just as a parliamentary rep, but as a resident of the community, when I can see elderly people like Miss Eldry and Tabel have to walk from Richmond to their homes or take a bus. You know why? Because the services that were usually available to them at Larissus, they have to go all the way to Richmond to source that. And I've made the point here before that the doctors and the health professionals at Richmond are overwhelmed. Research has shown that a district medical officer, where best practice is concerned, will see 15 to 20 people. Mr. Speaker, by 7:30, you have at least 60 to 70 people at the Richmond Health Center lining up to see a doctor. And when the crowd builds up, doctors from all the parts of the country have to be deployed to help with the congestion. And we're doing that at a time when the reserves are the best. We're doing that at a time when the savings have been at their best. We're doing that at a time when the economy is supposed to be at its best. We're doing that at a time when we're supposed to have the best, quote-unquote, Prime Minister St. Lucia has ever seen. Mr. Speaker, how can that be right? How can that be right? And I challenge anybody on the side, on principle, not politics, principle, to stand up and tell me, given what is happening today and the figures that were presented by the Prime Minister, that it is right for the people of Denry North to continue to live in that constituency without the Larry Health Center being reinstated. That can never be right, and none of you can muster the moral courage to stand up and tell me that this is right. You will play politics, of course you will, as you've always done. But I said to you, there are times when the lines have to be drawn. There are times for politics, and there are times when we have to act as the honorable men and women we're supposed to be, and call a spade and say when wrong is wrong. It is wrong for there to be a budget of $1.5 billion in St. Lucia and for the Larry Health Center not to be reinstated in the budget. That can never be right. And when it was happening in Choiseul, La Clery, Patience, Forestier, or Ogara, that would still be wrong. So I'm asking, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister will, in his quiet moments, reflect on this. And please make an allocation available so that the health center. Il wrong pour Jean Denry North pour qu'à vivre sans health center la ressource taper manger. Et que d'où les gouvernements flambeau venir power, Mr. Speaker, l'argent est en budget là. C'est pas là pour acheter, il est là, retiré. Et qu'on a venir ici et dit moi budget c'est ici pour l'année ça. C'est 1,5 billion, pas million, billion dollars. Et que l'argent ça, ou pas ça un petit money pour s'arranger un health center by Jean Larry depuis Denry North. Et qu'on a dit moi mon ni pour venir ici et que mettre des défenses contre bail comme ça et que l'offre ça aussi un bon ministre, aussi un bon politicien. That's not right, Mr. Speaker. And the absence of the provision of health care to the people of Denry North is something that I am particularly concerned about. Mr. Speaker, I move to head 43, one of my favorite agencies in the government, an agency which has seen a name change. It has been presided over by very colorful characters. Today we know it as the Department of Infrastructure, Ports and Energy, head 43. Larissus Denry Road diversion, Mr. Speaker. Larissus Denry Road diversion, Mr. Speaker. $2.15 million. Or to be exact, $2,151,909. The Larissus Denry Road diversion that is being spoken about in the budget is what the average person in Denry North will know as the Viebanen Bridge situation. That particular bridge, which is north of the Larissus playing field, is out of commission as we speak. Quite rightly so, the Ministry of Infrastructure has blocked the access to that bridge on both sides, the Despin side and the Larissus side. And the only road to Oleon as we speak is the Larissus road, which we thankfully paved on the eve of the elections of 2016. Mr. Speaker, this particular situation produces a major inconvenience for the people of Olio, Despin, and the valley generally. It's a very critical piece of road, and I'm hoping that at the soonest that this particular bridge will be...
Mr. Speaker, on a point of clarification, I believe the honourable member for Denry North is probably misinterpreting what is in the estimates, which refers to the Larissus Vieux-Fort Road diversion. Denry, on what line item is it?
It's 2.15 million. It's in your capital. Look at your Minister, capital breakdown.
Page 571. Member for Denry North, you may continue in the meantime.
Mr. Speaker, you'll be giving me my time back, right? Very well. So, member, you are okay with this? That's correct, right? What I cited is correct.
228. Check page 228.
Oh, yes. Yes, Mr. Speaker. So I was saying that amount of 2.15 million that is in the budget as Larissus Denry Road diversion is what the people of the valley will know as the Vieux Banan Bridge situation. L'année $2 millions qui est en budget là pour Vieux Banan et puis area ça là, Mr. Speaker. Et puis je dit that pour le moment, chemin pour qu'a sorti la ressource pour elle c'est monter au Lyon, moun pas ça service chemin ça encore because Ministry of Infrastructure et moi d'accord avec vous pour fermer chemin because situation là c'est qui critique et c'est une situation qui pas bon pour moun qui a servi là et nous pas vle un jour que la un accident et puis moun kay perd la vie. Mais ce qui est important, Mr. Speaker, pour nous note is that you have goods vehicles servicing shops in Oleon, goods vehicles servicing shops in Despin, and the Larissus concrete road, which services Oleon now, is beginning to experience a level of congestion that it is not used to. The road is a bit narrow, Mr. Speaker, and it is a challenge and a difficulty for a certain mix of vehicles to negotiate that road. And the situation is further exacerbated when you have mass crowd activities at Larissus, like football or even funerals. What the police used to do, they used to block off the entrance to Larissus at the Lapel Junction and allow vehicles to go up to Larissus and come down through their spin. But that cannot be done now because, as I said, the bridge in Vieux Banan is out of commission. Mr. Speaker, I did tell you that it was one of my favorite departments of government on the Head 43. I see what most of us who have interacted with the Ministry of Infrastructure would call recon and rehab. $11 million, or to be exact, $11,172,998. Mr. Speaker, with $11 million for recon and rehab, I am hoping that the Lapel Road will get some attention. Mr. Speaker, je crois que depuis $11 millions pour un chemin pour l'année ça là, c'est Jean Lapel là qui joignent un petit soulagement et puis situation yo. Chemin Lapel là c'est chemin qui en plus vieille condition en whole pays cette ici. Chemin ça a été servi par monde qui a resté Lapel. Là, les gens qui vendent marchandises, qui ont entré l'appel, ils vendent. C'est juste ça, ils ne peuvent pas venir parce que le chemin n'est pas bon. Vendeurs qui ont entré là, ils vendent pain, car ils sont là en déchet. Parce qu'ils ne peuvent pas aller là et puis en modoka. Ils ont s'avier, ou là, ils ont allé, ils ont perdre en chaitan parce que le chemin n'est pas bon. On a un chaitan qui est femmes en bas là, en l'appel. Ambulance là, c'est Jean-Ambulance là, j'ai dit moi, c'est pour nous faire en gamme. Et moi, j'ai dit, that je vais essayer de parler et puis le ministre qui a une responsabilité pour l'infrastructure et regarder si, Mr. Speaker, nous avons un soulagement pour chemin l'appel. Je l'appelle qu'on gens toute l'autre place dans cette liste ici, capé $1 et puis déchelé dans chaque gallon gaz si vous achetez. Quesh café, les aller à la gas station dans Richmond et bien n'importe quoi les acheter gaz. Anne café, Trevor gas les gaz, Caillou, Icon, Master White et puis Bailey qui a tapé affecté. Dave, là il sorti en ville et fini pour aller l'appel, il dit pour marcher les machines en médiatique comme un Bruce. Icon qui avait même bail là tout. They all deserve, Mr. Speaker, to see their $1.50 at work in their immediate community. Mr. Speaker, toi frère, ou pas ma banane, oublie ça, autre banane. Mr. Speaker, the Tuafwe Road in my constituency is in a deplorable condition. Yes, it is a farm access road. But again, you see the resilience of the people of Denry North continues to shine. They've not abandoned their farms. They still go up. And they meet me and they say to me, Kade sa ou sa fe epi chime banou? Kade sa ou sa fe ministry? Même si you pas pavely, but guate banou. And when I approached the minister recently, he told me the ministry's grader was destroyed a couple months ago. But I'm hoping that something will give. I have an elderly gentleman in my constituency. He's in his 80s. We call him Cools. And he also goes by the name Put It In It. a name for which I have sought an explanation but I have not been able to get, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, he was going to his garden one day. And because of the condition of the road, he slipped and he was able to break one of his arms. And I'm saying that very, very seriously. And he said to me that si she me a partir condition ça là, ça va dégager vivre moi aujourd'hui. And I tried to convince him that we will do something one way or the other. I'm not asking for Baba Green on the Twafe Road, but at least a heavy equipment to just go there and scrape it for the farmers who continue to work in Upper Grand Ravine. The Cardi Belmont Road is in a deplorable condition. I would be grateful for any assistance that can be given to that particular road. The Austin Hill Road, Austin Hill to Madigua Road, that too, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Infrastructure in 2015, when we were in government, did some work, but it was not completed. As parliamentary rep, I attempted to complete that road through the CDP. When the United Workers' Party assumed office, left Flambeau power en 2016, 2016, moun te jani contract yo en leme yo pour faire chimé Austin Hill. Ça que vous pour faire là. En bas ça nous a créé CDP, Constituency Development Program. C'est que Taïwan ka bail gouvernement cette ici, gouvernement Taïwan ka bail gouvernement cette ici là pour faire projet. C'est pas un cas qu'on nous dit nous de faire ou ça, Mr. Speaker. Nous dit nous de faire. Nous menons ingénieurs qui misent et qui bon nous pour ya. Nous couper projet là en combien shop. Nous bail mon contract. Yo te dit contract yo leme yo. Et que les gouvernements ont changé, Mr. Speaker. Yo tout bout projet a. Yo pas on a contract c'est moun nan. Et qu'on dit a union de moun sous ces flambeaux ko yo ka vini mettre pression en l'air moi.
Honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw. Mr. Speaker, I sincerely withdraw, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they come to me, surrogates of their party, and they want to apply pressure on me and ask me, what is it that you're doing? Qui sa ou ka fe bot chime Austin Hill? Le yo vini, and the party yo vini au gouvernement, yo hen moun te jani contract pou fe chime an. La rente hala, yo doubout li, et qu'on dit, je vais venir demander moi. Qui ça, moi, qui a fait votre chemin? Mais moi, je vais venir ici avec demander, Mr. Speaker, gouvernement, pour donner assistance. Sur la Jean Austin Hill là, pour prendre chemin en métro, pour mettre des Scott, qui a tapé manger. Pour prendre plus haut, pour bébé, pour mener monter Madigua, bon, Aiden, nous allons manger. Et que l'on tourne tous mes risques, Mr. Speaker. C'est pour l'État chemin dans là. You know it very well, Mr. Speaker. You've been there. I've seen you there, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, leave that alone. Mr. Speaker, these roads, I don't do that. These roads are in a deplorable condition. Mr. Speaker is probably the only person who has seen these roads. And maybe the member for Barbono too would know about that road. No. The member for Barbono would know the road very well. Because he worked in the constituency. And the member for Denry South knows the road too. Leave that alone. Mr. Speaker, the Louvet Buffalo Road needs assistance. As well. I would have to call for the protection of the chair.
Yes, and I'll give it to you right now. Honorable members, allow the members to proceed. Continue, sir.
The former Prime Minister is interfering with my presentation. Mr. Speaker, the Louvet Buffalo Road is also in need of assistance. And that's still near Shaija Louvet. At that time, on the bar, some of the hardest working people you'll find anywhere in this country are from Oleon. You can mouter planter cassave yo depuis 4 ou 5 bon matin et faire ça faire. And then they come back, Mr. Speaker. Et you can gratter, you can faire farine et faire cassave. Et you ba après taxi ou ça. You can mettre à terre à de yo depuis en junction de Glo. You can marcher avec pan yo en tête yo. You can arriver toute road nibe. You pas venir demander contract. You pas venir demander handout. Et moi jamais qui yo mendicants. Ça moi demander. C'est pour just buy mais on dit load matoyo en les chimères et puis on fait chimère en manière because il pas en enterrer ces moun ça pour qu'a planter cassave autant loin et pour qu'a prendre sac manioc là et porter en la tête dans distance co machine si vous êtes do. Okay, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Mondesi Road is also in a bad state. And I know that the Matter family that lives way to the top, they've been attempting They've been at...
Honourable Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was making reference to the Modesi Road in Upper Denny Riviere, and I was also making the point that the Matter family that lives way to the top have been attempting to develop their place up there into a heritage tourism site. But they've been affected badly by the condition of that particular road. And I'm hoping that, Mr. Speaker, when the Ministry or the Department of Infrastructure can revise their work program in Zone 3, they can find some resources to make that road a little more accessible to the people who use it in Modesi, Upper Denny Riviere. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Infrastructure has embarked on a massive island-wide guardrails program, if I should call it that. And I'm happy to see that particular project, Mr. Speaker, being implemented. And I've seen guardrails being installed in communities all over the country. But today I need to make a pitch for the people of Grand Ravine. Moi voulais demander pour community Grand Ravine. L'année encore là où qui était Grand Ravine car we form, Mr. Speaker. Just bon en femme Hayes en l'échelle Grand Ravine là. Kona là c'est yon qui anti-manière ça nous a dit en des chap. OK et qui whiskab. Après pour dire mais toi moun j'ai perdu la vie là. Encore na ça. Et là toujours ni accident. So, je vais prendre l'occasion aujourd'hui à pour demander au ministre Infrastructure pour garder si ça mettait un guardrail là pour nous, s'il vous plaît. Parce que nous ne pouvons pas en l'autre situation pour la dernier accident, une machine qui est sortie de chemin et puis les gens qui sont morts encore. Et comme ça, je vais dire about Ministry of Infrastructure. Ou pas demander en chaïbaï, mais délai on espoir d'être là où on peut joindre. So, c'est la première fois que je demande et que je crois, Mr. Speaker, that je jeune deliverance en laissé par là, je demande. L'année à 2006, je demande rien, Mr. Speaker, parce que je sais que je jeune. So, je même pas demandé. Et moi, je sais que je demandé. Et c'est pour ça que je demande pour Chimay Modesi, Austin Hill, Cardi Belmont Road, Buffalo, parce que je sais l'année Municia qui ni yo connaît manière ba la marcher, Mr. Speaker. Yo jate avec opposition et qui ont un gouvernement. And I remain eternally optimistic that something will give. Mr. Speaker, the Constituency Development Program in the Ministry of Economic Development, $10.6 million.
Honourable Member, you have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Department of Economic Development, Transport and Civil Aviation. The line item there, Constituency Development Program, $10.6 million. The CDP, Mr. Speaker, or Constituency Development Program, is a fancy term that we as parliamentarians and some technical people in the different ministries use. But for the average man, it is la Taiwanese gabay pour faire petit projet en community. Mr. Speaker, gouvernement sa agent a pouvoir pour 3 années, 3 years. Et me beaucoup pièce projet Taiwanese. Well, si il a fait un sigoué, un Denry North. Mais moi ça d'où? Là, nous tenons 3 années au gouvernement. After our 3rd anniversary in government, there are a number of CDP projects that have already been executed in Denry North. I know what my people come and they say to me, Mr. Speaker, those who understand the politics on the ground, they come to me and they say, il y a 3 années, le gouvernement ça pour ça péter un sac ciment en Denry North. Je vais le gouvernement invitation pour commencer à péter sac ciment en Denry North, s'il vous plaît. Let us get some of those projects, the CDP projects, going. I don't expect to be consulted, but let us give to the people of Denry North what they rightfully deserve. I have said it before. In a previous life of this country, they were the ones, Mr. Speaker, who went to the farms at 5 in the morning to deflower the bananas, to harvest the bananas, and ensure that in excess of $100 million by way of annual revenue was coming to the country. Some of them don't have the strength anymore. And what they're asking for is a little health center to be fixed, a little footpath, a little retaining wall, a little drain. And you're telling me because the majority voted for the St. Lucia Labour Party in the elections of 2016, they ought to be deprived. Mr. Speaker, we on this side do not support that. The majority on the other side, and I'm saying that sincerely, do not support that. But it is politically expedient to come here and let the eyes have it. But in your quiet moments, you need to reflect on some of those things. Let there be a more equitable distribution of the state resources. Of course, the politics must run. I know that, I understand that. But I believe the manner in which opposition parliamentarians have been treated is wrong, and this is the worst that it has ever been in the history of this country. I know projects were done in some constituencies and they were not consulted, but they were engaged when they were in opposition. Projects were being executed in their constituencies through their office. They were given autonomy, Mr. Speaker. But today, and you must understand, St. Lucia is a very small society, you know. Things will come full circle. People will talk. And those who are the biggest beneficiaries today, you should hear them, Mr. Speaker. You should hear about their behavior in the cabinet when some people who want to campaign trail with them, supporting them, get a little project. How quickly they forget. But that's only for a time. Politics and governance is cyclical. It revolves. It will take forever, but it must come full circle. I do not believe in revenge. I'm not a vengeful person. But Mr. Speaker, to those on the other side who believe and who are quick, their retort is, you all were there, you all did it too. You have an opportunity. You were given an overwhelming mandate to right the wrongs. Perpetuating it cannot be the way forward. You promised to build a new St. Lucia. You promised when it was convenient that it will be all in. But you are all in. But you know what you're all in? You are all in favoring foreigners over St. Lucians. You are all in ensuring that family and friends are the main beneficiaries of this country. You are all in remaining silent on the non-reinstatement of the distress fund. Every year in St. Lucia, there is somebody who struggles to put 10 sheets of plywood together and call it a home. And you should never look down on them, you know, because of the amount of sweat it took to construct those 2x4 homes and the amount of pride that resides in there. And Mr. Speaker, sometimes to no fault of theirs, they are at work and they get a call, that distressing call, that the little plywood structure has gone up in flames and you cannot find $400,000 to reinstate a distress fund. You cannot find $400 million, $400 million, pour mettre dans un budget of 1.5 billion pour aider les gens qui ont kabili. Mais quand on a parlé l'année en cette ici, pas jamais ouais, Mr. Speaker, c'est pour là pour vivre fort. Manière you have ça belle pour cheval venir pour. Là pas rien qui a enlevé moins plus. En tout ça gouvernement ça a fait. Pelé moi aller vivre fort, oui moi aller là. Pour you better have to withdraw that. Mr. Speaker, them to see a horse racing track under construction. And 200 yards from the horse racing track, on y a l'hôpital, ko nosni pour aller, et puis ça, you from Kayo pour laver les maillots. La bannière c'est les patients. And that is right. You know what I suspect is happening? There are men and women in this honorable house, and I say both genders, and I mean that sincerely, who have made names for themselves, but their legacy is under threat just by association and not publicly denouncing the things they know that are wrong, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it cannot be right for a horse racing track to be built in a country where a healthcare system is so dysfunctional. Mr. Speaker, I will move now to thank a lot of the people who make their contributions, those in the public domain and some behind the scenes, to life in the North. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the political leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party for the support that he has given to me in my stewardship of my constituency, as well as the executive of the St. Lucia Labour Party. the staff at the Denry North Parliamentary Office. I want to single out Esther, Damien, and Althea, as well as the many who come, Mr. Speaker, to volunteer their time and help discharge my responsibilities. I want to thank the executive of the Denry North, the executive of the Denry North Labour Party constituency group. I want to thank the principals of the various schools, as well as the administrators of the early childhood centers. I want to thank the Youth and Sports Council, the Football League. I want to thank the pastors and the priests of the different Christian denominations, Mr. Speaker. Pastor St. Four, Pastor Bray, Pastor Mafre, Father Raj, and Deacon Popo before him. I want to thank the Richmond Police under the command of ASP Alexander. I knew him to be a very productive and respected officer in the Immigration Department, or more specifically the Passport Office. But I notice he now operates from the Commander's office at the Denry Police Station. But you would know, Mr. Speaker, that the officer in charge of the Denry Police Station also provides oversight for Richmond. So I want to thank ASP Alexander, as well as Sergeant Gustav at the Richmond Police Station. Mr. Speaker, a budget of $1.5 billion can do a lot for St. Lucia. But I am not optimistic, given the record of this government, that we will get value for money at the end of the ensuing financial year. Wastage, Mr. Speaker, is one of the main characteristics of this particular administration. And Mr. Speaker, as I take my seat, I want to say to the people of Denry North who sent me to this chamber to represent their interest, that we are not easily broken, and attempts by the government to sideline me in community-based activities will not always work. But instead, it will fortify my stance. I will remain doggedly resolute in protecting the interests of those people who do not have a voice. I do not come here for praise. I'm not seeking popularity. I understand the community that I represent. I'm a product of that community. I've resided there all my life. And any time I stand on my feet in this parliament and I speak on behalf of the people of Denry North, Mr. Speaker, I am basically reflecting my own personal experiences. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for your indulgence. I want to thank colleagues on both sides for your indulgence and your cooperation. And I look forward to working with you for the betterment of the people of Denry North. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.